MAXXI and the MACRO are two striking contemporary interventions in Rome that attempt to transform industrial sites into sculptural museums for 21st century art. Lying just beyond the Aurelian walls, these two museums beckon a new chapter in Rome's history as a cultural hotspot. These projects, though distinct in funding and organization, share similar outcomes by nature of their design. The MAXXI was commissioned as the first public museum for contemporary art in Italy, as its name stands for the Museum of the 21st Century. In response to the 1998 call for proposals, the Contemporary Arts Division of the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage received 273 project proposals from a range of international architects. Essential to the design brief was to incorporate the 19th century Montello barracks into the project and maintain the facade of the barracks on the Via Guido Reni Street facade. A jury selected Anglo-Iraqi architect Zaha Hadid's design from 15 finalists, which included greats like Rem Koolhaas, Stephen Hall, Toyo Ito, and Sana. Zaha Hadid's concept for the space was to create a dynamic exhibition, blurring the lines between circulation and gallery. The swooping concrete masses cantilever to create dramatic moments both inside and outside the museum. A plaza connects the edges of the site to introduce a rare public open space in the Flaminio neighborhood. The barracks are preserved through the cafe and the bookstore. The competition for the MACRO project, which was commissioned and built within the same decade as the MAXXI, presents a similar brief. The idea was to transform the site of the old Peroni brewery, built between 1902 and 1922. After the company had moved their operations further outside the city center, Rome signed a contract in 1983 to use the vacant space. In 1990, they opened 6 rooms of the newly renovated space as exhibition. The full museum opened in 2002. During this refurbishment, the city proposed a competition to redevelop the site as a new location for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Rome, otherwise known as MACRO. In 2001, French architect Odile Deck won the commission. The primary concept of the project was to create a sort of urban street through the site, linking the city to a public piazza on the second level. Deck describes the path as a promenade of discovery, where, quote, the limit between institution and city are blurred, unquote. The theater that sits in the main foyer is the heart of the project, and this irregular object is one of the many design elements consistent throughout Deck's work. Some of the details I love in the foyer are the floating walkways, the multifunctionalism of the theater, and how the walls slip to create the entrances to the galleries. Both of these architects take a radical position on the form and function of a museum, which is arguably what won them these commissions. They both emphasize dynamism in space and envision a continuous gallery that questions the traditional box museum. The idea and execution produced fabulous, award-winning works of architecture. However, visiting them now, I can't help but feel that there's an element missing, preventing the architecture from fulfilling its initial goal. Curators of both the MAXXI and the MACRO are quick to mention the challenge of exhibiting artwork in these sculptural halls. This points to a major flaw of the hypermuseum phenomenon. How can the city spend over 100 million euros on art museums that are somehow hostile to exhibition? This misalignment between architect and curator seems to be the recurring downfall of these sculptural works. For me, the art in architecture is how the built environment can influence how we live and think. More than aesthetics and composition, architecture is a functional tool that directly impacts our relationships to each other and our cities. While these works of art can be beautiful or impressive, they become obsolete if not conducive or adaptable to the community's needs. I don't think the MAXXI nor the MACRO failed their functional requirements, but I am suggesting that there's an inconsistency between the architect and the leadership of the museums. Perhaps the philosophy of art and exhibition needs to evolve to adapt to this new style of museum. Instead of the traditional pictorial art that Rome is accustomed to, these new spaces are maybe better suited to other mediums and more site-specific installations. Rather than just a venue for exhibition, these spaces can be part of the work, where the collection is not just curated for a theme, but also for the space. Without a consistent and shared concept from architect to gallerist, the designer's vision is undermined. In the macro especially, I felt that DEC's concept of continuous movement was inhibited by the lack of artwork. At one point, I even consulted the emergency exit map to try and understand the intended way of moving from the heart of the building to the exhibition spaces. The complexity and intricacies of the circulation are intriguing and create wonderful moments for the architecture appreciator, but it can be incredibly frustrating. I was met with many dead ends, roped off areas, dark corners, and emergency-only exit doors. Often attached to the idea of contemporary art is the need to be bigger, more radical, and more esoteric than its predecessors. This culture creates an intellectual pretentiousness that isolates exhibits from the general public. While small galleries may have the luxury to appeal only to a small set of like-minded critics, museums of this scale cannot be successful this way. Essential to being inviting, lively, cultural attractions is traffic, whether it be museum goers or not. More than a museum, any infrastructure of this scale needs to have some element of public space. Hadid and DEC are both aware of this condition and allow a part of the site to act as a piazza. Hadid carves a plaza through the site, giving the neighborhood a more typical open space, while DEC pulls the public through her building, arriving at a raised piazza. I think both of these choices are beautiful compositional moves, but yet the spaces remain underused, perhaps because they feel isolated and private behind the gates. Finding a way to increase traffic to these piazzas, more than the museum itself, I think is the key to the future success of the projects. From an architectural perspective, these cultural commissions are valuable beyond the winning entry. The competition for proposals opens a discourse between international designers that can be studied and compared. In fact, both of these projects are continually evolving. The MAXXI recently accepted a proposal to extend the museum using one of the barracks. The winning entry will be executed by Lawn Architects in 2026. The MAXXI is extending its own influence using another industrial site, the ex Mettatoio in the Testaccio neighborhood. The old slaughterhouse is used by the architecture school for classes and presentations, and it is intended that the complex will become a cultural hub of sorts with exhibition and commercial potential. Under the right leadership, Hadid and DEC's masterful designs can reach their full potential. What I like most about the idea of a hypermuseum is that their influence extends beyond the site. These museums can be catalysts for renewal and redevelopment of the neighborhood. With clear and aligned objectives between designer and curator, I think these museums have the potential to be more than just gallery spaces.